So, welcome everybody. This is Nigel Merrick, the founder of Zenilog and the host of the Photography Marketing Masters podcast, and welcome to this workshop on building the foundation of a marketing strategy. And I just want to start by going over what we're going to be covering today, and we'll start with why most photography marketing doesn't work, because unfortunately a lot of the photographers out there are telling me, and also putting the questions out in various Facebook groups, that the marketing that they're trying isn't working. It's not bringing in the clients that they want, it's not getting the results that they want, and there are lots of reasons why most photography marketing these days just doesn't seem to be working properly, and we'll go over that. So we're going to look at what your clients need to know before they'll hire you. This isn't like the days of the yellow pages where people would just flick through, pick a photographer, pick up the phone and call them. No, these days social media, for example, has really changed the whole landscape of marketing and kind of turned it upside down, if you like. And so people, before they'll hire a photographer, want to feel a little bit more of a connection with folks. We'll also look at how building a foundation for your marketing can help to stabilize what you're doing. It can really create a solid platform, if you like, for moving forward. And that foundation is critical, just like the foundation of a building. It's what you're going to build your marketing on, and it kind of informs everything that you do from that point forward. Then we'll get into the 5 questions that you can ask yourself to create that foundation. So these are 5 things that if you get the answers to these and you put them together and you assemble them into a coherent format, that will help you then to build a foundation that you can then confidently move forward with. And next, we've got the Q&A at the end. So if anyone has any questions, which I'm sure you will, and we've got some time at the end, we'll go through and answer those for you. So first of all, why are you here? I mean, it seems like a bit of a weird question. Hopefully you're all here to learn and find out something new and get some motivation for moving forward. But some of the reasons why people like yourselves come onto these training webinars, especially for marketing, is that marketing just isn't working. You're trying everything that you can think of, but it's just not working. You've got the website, the blog, the Facebook, all that kind of stuff, and you're putting stuff out there constantly, and maybe you feel like you're working 36 hours a day or something like that, it seems sometimes, and it's just not happening. The phone's not ringing, the email inbox is just not filling up with inquiries, the people come to the website, they don't do anything, and they just leave, and it's frustrating. The next is, you want more clients, but you're not sure what to try next. You've tried everything, and this is where I see a lot of the frustration in the Facebook groups, for example, where people are saying, what strategies can you recommend? What should I try next? I've done this, I've done that, and sometimes it's not that they're doing the wrong things. It's just that maybe they're not doing enough of the right things, or they're doing some of the things they should be doing in the wrong order or at the wrong time. For example, just before we started this workshop, I had somebody in my LinkedIn group post a question of, I'm an art college and I'll be graduating in June and I want to work on getting some bookings going for when I graduate. What's the best form of marketing? And it's really, it's a good question to be asking, but at the same time, it's almost a meaningless question because we don't know anything about what they plan to do as far as the type of photography, who their target audience is, or anything like that. Obviously, they're at the first stages of their business, so there's some things that they need to do, and this would be a great example of a time when somebody should really be focusing on creating this foundation, which is what we're going to be talking about today. Perhaps, photographers are losing clients to the cheap photographers. This is another big problem that I see a lot of, especially in Facebook groups, people complaining that, I had an offer, or I've been trying to attract more people, and all they're doing is asking how much. They find out, and then the next thing you know, they've gone to the cheaper photographer down the street, and of course, obviously, that's a frustration as well. And finally, there must be a better way. There are successful photographers out there who are working quite happily and being successful at what they do. I interview them all the time on my podcast, for example. And so there's got to be a better way. There has to be a way to solve this problem and get more people in the door. And so that's what we're going to be looking at today. Just grab some more tea here. So the fundamental element in modern marketing, if you like, is the human element. And by that I mean we're dealing with people. This is a people business. We need to feel a strong connection with the people that we work with, especially in service type industries and that kind of thing. And it's a little bit like getting your hair cut. It's always a bit of a difficult thing when you change hairdressers and you go to a hairdresser that doesn't know you've never let them loose on your hair before. You don't know what they're going to do, whether they're going to understand what it is that you want, and it's not the sort of thing where you can just pick a random hairdresser, if you like, and go to them. If that matters to you, if how your hair looks is of some importance to you. And it's the same with photographers. I mean, people need to know that you can make them feel comfortable in front of the camera. They need to know what your approach is, what your style is. And I don't mean just the way you light your images or pose things, but just your whole sort of philosophy, if you like. It makes a big difference these days, especially with social media, and people are becoming so much more savvy about hiring people. And about, I guess it was probably getting on for 7 or 8 years ago, there was this whole concept of the know, like, and trust factor came about. And it's very true, and it's held true certainly for all of that time, and will probably continue to do so. The people need to get to know you, like you, and trust you before they'll think about really hiring you seriously, especially if you charge substantial fees, which you should be doing. And let's think of an example for a moment. Think of an artist or a writer, maybe a singer or an actor or celebrity that you resonate with, somebody who you're a fan of. Think about why are they memorable to you. And if you've got some examples in mind, you can put them in the chat box and we can talk about them. But why are they memorable to you? What things about their story stand out for you? Are they perfect people, or do they have any flaws? Does it matter if they're not perfect? Probably not. It usually doesn't matter all that much unless they're doing something really terrible, then or unexpectedly bad. I mean, Brian Williams, for example, has been in the news lately. He was a trusted news anchor for many, many years, and he's obviously caused himself some serious brand damage of late. But that's an extreme example. But there are people out there who we admire and respect who do have flaws and imperfections. And why is it that you resonate with them? And you're no different as a photographer, albeit on a somewhat smaller scale, but you have to make a connection with your clients, and your clients have to feel some kind of ability to relate to you. I mean, for example, let me just pick somebody kind of well known, I guess, and I'll describe them to you, and let's see if you can tell me in the chat box who you think I'm talking about. So this person is an extremely successful businessman. He, as far as I remember, was a college dropout, so he didn't finish college. He suffers from dyslexia, which is can be considered to be quite a flaw in business. When in his early days, he was known as being a little bit of a wide boy, as we call them in England, and he wasn't above doing things that, not exactly illegal, but they were kind of a little bit on the fringe there. He was a bit of a risk taker. He doesn't dress the same way that you would expect most highly successful entrepreneurs to dress. He's done everything from running a record company to starting an airline to now setting up a venture to go into space, of all things. And, he's a very much loved and respected person. He has his own island in the Caribbean. And of course, you probably know that I'm talking about Richard Branson. And is he perfect? No, but people can relate to him really well. I've met the guy. I met him on one of his airplanes one time, flying from Manchester to Boston. And he really is an extremely personable gentleman. And one of the reasons why his business is so successful is because he's very relatable, very personable, but he doesn't distort the truth of who he is to satisfy everybody out there. Some people don't like him, I'm sure, but a lot of people do, and a lot of people buy his products and use his services and so on. So as I said, we have to, there are certain things that your clients need to know first before they can hire you. And the first thing really, and we've talked about this a lot, and we especially, we've talked about this in the Prime Focus meetings as well, is your why. The reason that you're doing all this in the first place. Why are you a photographer? Why are you doing this when you could probably be having an easier time earning a living doing something else? I mean, when it comes to sort of the easiness scale, I know that my life as a computer programmer and project manager was a lot easier in one sense than it was as a photographer because, well, I just worked for somebody else. They told me what to do. They gave me a whole bunch of specifications for a program, and I went off and wrote it, and then along came the next one. I didn't have to produce or generate the ideas for the work. It was just given to us. When you're an entrepreneur and you work for yourself, it's a little bit different, So there's got to be a reason why you stay with it, and why, if I came up to you right now and I grabbed your camera from you and said, you can't be a photographer anymore, it's not allowed, you have to go get another job, you'd probably be pretty upset, right? You wouldn't like that. So there's a reason why. And we have to kind of communicate that to our prospects and get them invested in the fundamental sort of reasons why we're in business. And there's a very good book that explains about this in detail by Simon Sinek called Start With Why. You can look that up, or I'll put it in the notes on the blog, and you can check that out from there. It's a great book and definitely a must-read for most photographers. So as I said before, people need to, get to know, like, and trust you, and that's not something that happens overnight. It takes time. You can't, generally walk into a bar, walk up to somebody and say, hey, I'm Nigel, how are you doing? Would you like to get married tomorrow? It doesn't work that way. And we have to get to know the people that we're going to be working with. They have to like us, for one thing, because we're in a very personable business. And they have to trust that we're going to do a good job. And we can communicate these things through things like our website, the words we use, the pictures that we show, the testimonials that we have on there, through social media, through our email marketing, through videos, whatever media you want to, you can actually convey all of this stuff to your prospects. But it has to be done. We can't just have a website that, has welcome to my website and a bunch of photos and call me if you're interested. That doesn't work anymore. And so they need to feel a deeper connection with you. And it goes back a little bit to almost being like, being a fan of a rock star, or being a fan of Richard Branson or whatever. There's that sense of connection. It goes much deeper than just, oh, well, I know this person who happens to take photographs. It's, if somebody's going to recommend you to their friends, for example, and they have a real deep connection with you because of the experience that you gave them, then they are much more likely to not only just refer their friends to you, but they're going to be really excited about it when they do. And a lot of this stuff is quite sort of intangible. It's hard to put your finger on, but you know it when you've got it. This is where you can put the power of testimonials to work for you and social proof on your website. So whenever you show a photograph, for example, it really helps if you have something from the person in the photographs who can actually say, something about the experience that they had with you. And so testimonials and social proof work really well. And when it comes to your About page, we've talked about this a lot. We did a whole webinar, in fact, on this topic, and there's a big article on the website about the About page. You need to make your About page about your clients and about where their needs intersect with your personality and what you do. It's kind of almost, a shared values system. If they see photography or can come to see photography in the same way that you do, then they have a much higher chance of relating to you and wanting to learn more. It's not just about you. The About page, the About Me page is somewhat misnamed because it's not really about you at all, it's about them. So let's take a look at the typical photographer's story. And the first thing really is that they build a website, they get on Facebook and start a blog, they do some SEO and then kind of hope for the best. I mean, does that sound familiar? I'm sure it does to most people. They get this idea, well, I don't know what else to do, so I'm going to put a website up, put some photos on there. I need something that's going to showcase my work. I'll start a blog, maybe, although a lot of people kind of get a little bit leery about that one. They jump on Facebook, they maybe do a little bit of SEO, and then cross their fingers and nothing happens. And, or they follow some of the commonly held false assumptions, and there's a lot of these. And I spend quite a lot of my time questioning these things, and sometimes I get into a bit of hot water with some people about some of these things because they feel like I'm trying to pick apart some of the fundamentals. But really, it's things like slideshows, for example. There's a lot of photographers have basic slideshows on the home page, but the idea is that they think that a slideshow is going to work best to showcase their photography, when really, yes, it does that, but it doesn't do anything to further the cause of getting the prospect closer to hiring you. It just gives them something to look at, and there's no emotional connection, and there's no call to action with those. There's the need sometimes to show as many photos as possible, and we see this oftentimes in a blog post where somebody will do a session or a wedding, and then the next day or a couple of days later they'll put a blog post out with 30 photos in it, one after another, and maybe a little bit of text. And that it can actually be counterproductive. It doesn't work as well as we sometimes assume that it's going to. Another assumption is that text doesn't matter because the photography will speak for itself, which really has been shown time and time again to not be true. We have to have the stories behind the images. Another assumption is that sales copy isn't needed because you don't want to come across as being too pushy. This is a difficult one because most photographers probably understand that we do need to have some sales copy, text on the website that gets people moving in the right direction, but they have difficulty with it because they don't want to be seen as being too salesy or too sales oriented, and it can hinder the sales process. And finally, the last assumption that I sort of want to mention here is the idea that people, if they like the photography, will think about taking the next step on their own independently, which they won't. They're browsing a website, they're busy, there's a lot of other distractions going on, and unless it's actually presented right there in front of them as a step to take, they may not, think about what they're going to do. So having put a website up and jumped on Facebook and started the blog, you might get some visitors, but oftentimes what I'm seeing is that people get very few really serious inquiries. This is probably the vast majority of the people that I talk to every week tell me that, the phone's not ringing. I'm not getting any emails, or maybe they email me and ask how much, and I email them back and they never hear from them again. And it feels a bit like starting all over again every single day. Every time they get up in the morning, it's like they're starting their business from scratch all over, which is a terrible, terrible feeling. And that lack of business creates the need for last minute, or what I call emergency marketing, where you wake up in a cold sweat on a Monday morning thinking to yourself, oh gosh, I really need to make some money this week. Last week was terrible, I didn't get any clients, I'm really desperate, I've got bills to pay, I better throw something out there. And so you come up with a last minute campaign or offer or something, and put it out there, and more often than not it just doesn't work. And sadly, of course, there's no easy button for this. Staples would probably like us to believe that there is an easy button, but there really isn't. And if it was easy, I suppose everybody would be doing it. But it's not insurmountable either. It is not insanely difficult. It's just not that easy. And there's also no single effective marketing tactic. Everything works when it's part of a larger system. And this is a very subtle thing, because again, I get this question of, well, what's the best marketing thing to do? Or you'll see it again in Facebook groups, people ask the question, what's the best marketing tactic that you've used? But the answer, well, there is no real answer, because if you think about it, SEO, let's take that as an example, SEO doesn't work on its own. It needs a website to go with it. And not only that, if you can get the website listed high up in Google, and people click on it and come to the website, but then other parts of the system, such as the marketing copy, let it down, then people will just leave and not do anything. Likewise with Facebook, you could do the same thing there. You can send people from Facebook to your website all day long. But if it's not persuasive and it's not making that connection, then nothing happens. So we can't point to Facebook, or we can't point to SEO or video marketing or anything else as a sort of a single tactic, because it's all part of a system. It doesn't work otherwise. And different businesses need different bits, at different times, according to what stage of business that they're in. Somebody who's just starting out, for example, needs to take things into consideration to start attracting an audience. People who've been in the business for some time maybe would focus more on nurturing and that kind of thing. So being different and standing apart from the rest is also a good thing, but a lot of people find that kind of frightening. Nobody likes to be pointed at and being singled out as being different, but in one sense we have to, in order to carve out our own little niche, if you like, our own space in the business. And sadly, most marketing fails, certainly for people who are new to the business, and even for people who've been in the business for a little while too. And some of the reasons why are things like not understanding who your ideal clients are, really. I mean, in a lot of detail. I was listening to a podcast episode this morning from Copyblogger, actually Rainmaker, which are part of the Copyblogger people, and in there they were talking about how copywriters, the people who write the sales text and marketing text for websites and other marketing outlets, they will spend literally months researching the audience first before they ever write a word. They want to get to know who it is that they're talking to in as much detail as possible. And so if you're a wedding photographer, for example, it's not enough to just say, well, my target audience are brides who are getting married. You know, do you service a particular subset of brides, people with a specific interest and that kind of thing? What's their personality like? What type of jobs do they have? Who do they hang out with? Where do they socialize? What kind of things do they like to do when they're not working? What Facebook interests do they have? How do they talk, you know, amongst themselves and that kind of thing? And so understanding them and studying them is going to be a key factor. Another reason is that, you know, having little or no influence on your target market, and this is something that is kind of grown over time and through the content that you'll create and all that kind of thing. But if you can't influence the people that you are wanting to get to hire you, then obviously that's going to impede your ability to do that. A lack of perceived authority in the areas that you specialize in. Now, for people who are totally new to the business, it's unavoidable at the beginning because you're just starting out. So you're not an authority, you know, you're not an expert, if you like, in the area that you're in. But that will come over time, and it's something that you'll grow as you develop your experience. But you can grow that authority by being, you know, outwards, you know, and you know, involved in the community and all that kind of thing, and talking to people who are also servicing the same people that you are, and we'll talk a little bit about that in just a moment. An insufficient quality of of online content for your audience. So you know, for example, the blog, you know, if you, or your website, if you just have a page that says, well, hey, I do wedding photography, or I photograph pets, and here are some pet photos, and you know, click here to book a session or give me a call or whatever, it's not enough, because there are things that your audience are wanting to know about what it is that you do, or about the type of photography that you're doing. They need to know the answers to that, and we'll get to that in just a second. But if you don't have that quality content online, then it can hinder your SEO, it can reduce the ability for people to get to trust you and all that kind of thing. I mean, let's take Zenilog for example. Now, that blog has been in existence for about 8 years, and I've been writing on it fairly consistently over that time. But you know, the content that's on there is intended to give people some education about questions that they have about working in the photography industry, and my hope is that, you know, it gets people more involved with me, and of course many of you are on here today because of the content that I put out in the past, and that's kind of how this works. Inappropriate website design is another reason why marketing fails, and unfortunately photographers here are caught, you know, somewhat between two worlds. On one hand, they're very visual people. You love taking photographs. Your thinking, you know, revolves around imagery, and we kind of assume, in some regard, that our clients are going to respond to those photographs, and so we look for websites that are there to showcase work or show off our portfolio and that kind of thing. You know, fine art photographers, you know, have websites that are designed to have galleries, and you click on a photograph and then there's a buy now button right next to it. Sadly, those things don't work exactly as we expect them to, because then there's that connection thing is missing. Wasting time on the wrong social networks. Again, this is something that people kind of default to when they don't know what else to do. So they'll spend a lot of time on Facebook when, you know, they might be a commercial photographer, but they're stuck and they're having a hard time in business, so they go over to their favorite Facebook group and start asking questions there, when really they might be better off going over to LinkedIn and talking to their LinkedIn contacts and investing some time over there instead. And you need to kind of invest the time where your target market is most active. Ineffective search engine optimization is another one that causes marketing to fail. Now, this can be a case of where the SEO is good and you're getting traffic because you're high up in the search rankings, but the website itself is letting things down. Or it could just be that you're using outdated SEO strategies and tactics that no longer work. That whole area has changed a lot in just the last less than 12 months. In fact, it's been somewhat sort of accelerating over the last year, and things are changing quite quickly to the point where it's actually making life a little bit easier in many regards, because when it comes to a blog, for example, we don't have to worry about doing SEO on blog posts all that much anymore. And I know that might come as a bit of a surprise to a lot of people. And I was talking to somebody about this the other day in a Facebook group, and they were almost thinking that I didn't know what I was talking about when I said, you don't need to do SEO on blog posts. But when we talked about it more and they understood the reasonings behind it, then it made more sense to them, and they could see, wow, things really have changed. And then finally we've got the poorly conceived emergency marketing that I mentioned before. So again, throwing an offer together on a Monday morning, putting it up on the website or on Facebook Monday afternoon and expecting the phone to ring is probably not going to work, because there's not been enough lead-up time to it. There's not been any kind of content put out there that would lead people towards thinking about whatever it is that you've got on offer and that kind of thing. So I'm just going to pause for a second and grab some more tea. But is this, while I'm doing that, if you could just put something in the chat box, let me know. Is this helping you? Is this good stuff? Okay, cool. Awesome. Thank you, Cindy. Thank you, Stefano. All right, fantastic. And Lily, yeah, there's certainly a lot to think about in all of this. It's a big topic. It's not something that we can really say, okay, we'll spend 20 minutes thinking about it and then that's it. This is the foundation, and and actually, this will be of big help as you move forward. And talking of foundations, of course, there's a drawing of a shovel. At least I think it's a shovel. That's what it was supposed to be. And so why a foundation is so important? Well, first and foremost, it determines everything that you do and say in your marketing as you go forward. And for the wedding photographers that are listening here, you wouldn't photograph a wedding without some kind of a plan. Now, I'm not saying that you'd have to have a shot list or anything like that, but a wedding has a structure to it. It has a plan. You know that you've got all the stuff that happens before. The getting ready stuff. You got to do your bridal portraits and your bridesmaids and groomsmen and all that kind of thing, and then you've got the wedding itself and then the reception, and you have a plan, and whether you realize it or not, that you have a foundation to that plan. You have a structure that it's all built on. Likewise, if you did a extended portrait session for a family, you wouldn't design a portrait album without some idea of what it's going to look like when it's finished. And when I worked in software development, we always worked on the foundations first. In fact, to be quite honest with you, at the beginning, I hated that because it was boring. It was really the worst part of the job. I couldn't stand, wasting what I felt was wasting time, writing specifications for a program that I could literally write in an hour. But it was important because at that point we would know if we had all the bases covered. We would know if we were going to be having the right features and stuff in the program that we were going to write, and it saved a lot of time fixing bugs and such like further on down the line. It affects how your clients see you as well, because especially if we go back to that idea of why, you project this persona of your business, and this is probably one of the biggest changes that's taken place, I think, in the last probably 8 or 9 years, certainly since social media came along, is that businesses now have much more of a personality than they used to. When you think back to how it used to be, if we can remember that far back, it seems like a different age, really. Before the internet, businesses were faceless entities that just threw out ads on TV or in magazines, and that was about the closest we ever came to seeing their personality. But now, it's quite different. Even the way that businesses advertise on TV has changed dramatically. I mean, just think of the well, certainly for those of us here in the United States, the Budweiser commercials, that they put on during the Super Bowl. There's absolutely nothing to do with beer, pretty much, in the commercials. They're stories. I saw one recently that somebody forwarded to me from Vistaprint, which is a company that does business cards and flyers and that kind of thing. And they created probably one of the best commercials that I've ever seen, as far as hooking into the emotions and using a story to convey the benefits of what they do. It shows a real personality, and it also reveals some of the foundations on which that company is built. The foundation also helps you keep your eye fixed on your goals. So, I think I'm not sure that a lot of photographers really have goals for their business. As sad as that is, I don't think I did when I started out. I just wanted to be a photographer and hopefully still be in business next year. That was about the best goal that I had at that time. But, do you have an idea of what you want your business to look like in a year or 3 years or 5 years? Do you want to have people working with you? Do you still want to be a solo business owner? That's fine. It's fine either way. It doesn't matter. What kind of level of service are you going to be providing and that kind of thing? What is it that you want your business to achieve for you, as a sort of a life type thing? And as I mentioned just now with the Vistaprint example, the foundation becomes a big part of your personal brand. And whether we like it or not, we are the brand of our business. And by brand, what I'm talking about here isn't things like the logo and the colors and fonts and all that kind of stuff that people tend to associate with brand identity, but it's your personality. It's how do people think about you is part of your brand. It's how they describe you to their friends, and it's what they say about you when you're not looking, as well. How do people talk about what it is that you do and the way that you do it? It's that sort of unique collection of things that make you stand out from the rest. And I think if one thing is important in all of this, with the brand, it's consistency. And it's important to make sure that everyone gets the same message. And, that there's lots of ways to do that, from simple things like, making sure that you use the same profile photo on all of your social media channels and the same bio and all this kind of thing, so that it's consistent across every point where people can come into contact with you and your photography. So let's move into these 5 questions then. We talked a little bit about this at the beginning. I said this is what we're going to be talking about today. And we've got 5 questions that you can ask yourself that will give you the ammunition or the fuel, if you like, to create the foundation of a strategy. Because seriously, if you walk up to somebody and say, hey, tell me what the foundation for your marketing strategy is, they probably give you a strange look and wander away, in confusion, because it's not actually it doesn't sound like it means very much, and so what we need really is some means of actually putting it down on paper so that we know what it is that we're actually working with here. And the first question is, what problems can you solve? Now you might be thinking to yourself, well, hey, my clients don't have any problems. My photography doesn't solve problems, and that may be true, although if you look at it in a loose sense, if you're a wedding photographer, then the problem is that the bride and groom need photographs of their wedding, and that's the problem that you solve. That's the main problem. What is it that people are looking for? But it goes beyond that. Okay, it's things like what problems or apprehensions do people have about working with a photographer that offers what you do. So let's think of an example. A pet photographer. Now, as pet photographers, we're used to dealing with this every day, and a lot of the apprehensions and problems that people have, we don't necessarily see because we're used to it. We're immersed in the business. But somebody out there looking at your website for the first time, maybe they've just gotten themselves a new pet, adopted a dog or cat or something like that, and they're thoroughly in love with this animal. And like a lot of people, they want to dote on it. They buy posh toys from the pet store. They give it the best food and all that kind of thing, and they decide that they want to get a portrait made of this pet. So they find your website, but they've got questions going around in their head. Things like, well, is it safe to take my animal to a studio? I don't understand. I don't know how that works. What's going to happen if there's other animals there? How's it going to interact? Do I have to be involved in the session somehow to keep my pet calm? How am I going to get my pet ready for this thing? What if it goes to the bathroom halfway through the session? That's going to be kind of embarrassing. What's going to happen then? But the photographer deals with these things all the time, and they know what the answers to them are, and they can put people at their ease through the creation of content on their website that explains all of this stuff and answers all of these questions. So, we've all seen things like frequently asked questions. Well, this is kind of like a supercharged version of that, where you create detailed content for each question. So, if you're not sure what these things are, well, you can pay attention to what people are saying on things like social media. It's like a fire hose of information if you actually stop and pay attention to what people are saying. And you can participate in groups where these folks hang out, pet lovers groups and that kind of thing, and just kind of observe how they talk. And that way you can identify the language that people use when they're talking about some of these issues. And the people from Copyblogger, Brian Clark, who started Copyblogger, is a huge proponent of this technique. And he will spend a long time just literally analyzing how people talk on social media, and then use that same language in his own marketing, and so that when people read it, they resonate with it right away. I do the same thing. I pay attention to how photographers are talking about the frustrations they have in their business, and I keep a little file, where I put those things. And then if I'm creating a sales page for something, perhaps something like this workshop, I'll take some of that and I'll use those same kind of phrases and some of the ideas in there, so that when people read it, it feels like you're talking to them. And I've had people actually email and say, in response to an article that I put out on my blog, for example, I've had people email me and say, literally, I really enjoyed that article. I felt that you were talking to me. And of course, I wasn't, because I didn't know who they were, but they had shared some of the same frustrations a lot of other people had voiced in the past. You can ask them personally. So, if you, again, let's take the example of a pet photographer. So if you happen to be out in the pet store, and there's people in there, you can talk to them about their pets and ask them, say, have you ever thought about having your pet photographed? And they might say something like, well, yes, but, and then it's all of that's valuable intelligence and information that you can then use. You can do a survey. If you have an audience already, or a Facebook page or something like that, you can conduct a short survey of your existing clients or fans and followers and so on, and ask them what kind of things you struggle with, when it comes to this. What would you like to know more about? We photographed your pet last year. What would you like to have known ahead of time? That kind of thing. And then you make the content that you create for them easily shareable. So what I mean by that is, make sure that there's those Facebook share buttons and tweets and so on, that people can literally click on that and share it with their friends. This is where video marketing can really help. If you can create some short videos that people will get a lot out of, and that they can they're entertaining and so on, that they can then share with their friends, and it helps to spread the word around. I could spend an entire hour just on this one bullet point alone, which is to build resource content hubs within your website. And so what I mean by that is, let's take the example of the frequently asked questions. A lot of times you'll go to a website and you'll see a little thing in the menu that says FAQ, and then click on that and you get a page with some headings and subheadings. It's just one page with a bunch of questions and some answers underneath. Well, instead of just that, and you put a bit more effort into it, you can create a separate page for each question and answer, and then you have an index page, a little bit like the table of contents in a book, where you just link to each of those pages in turn. And what you've done then is you've created yourself a little resource hub, and that can sit within your website, and it can act almost like a little website within a website. But the great thing about it is it attracts SEO, it will get more visitors, and people will be more engaged with it. And if you include your calls to action in that kind of thing, then it will also spur people into action. So that's the first one. There's an awful lot that you could use to start building your foundation just in this one question alone. Next up is, how can you create a great experience? Now, when I ask photographers, well, what do you feel is the most successful marketing tool that you have? I would say 75% of the time people say word of mouth marketing, and which is great, fantastic. So word of mouth is obviously an effective method. Well, how many, how's it working for you? Oh, well, not very well. Well, what do you mean? Well, I get some referrals, but not as many as I would like. Okay, so why do they think that is? Why is it that they think that word of mouth marketing is going to be the best, but on the same time they're saying that it's not working so well? And that is because probably they're not answering this question as well as they could be. And to do that, there's a lot of talk about the client experience and all this kind of thing, and in fact it's something that comes up quite often in the Photography Marketing Masters podcast when I talk to photographers. A lot of times we'll talk about the benefits of the experience and that kind of thing. So you can go back and listen to a lot of those and get some more details on it. But it's in danger of being overused and without any real sort of substance or explanation. So here are some tips that I felt might help you with this one. First of all, under-promise and over-deliver. Now, that's a commonly used phrase, but I think, if you think back, you can identify some experience where you've, with a business, maybe, a hotel or something like that, where you came away feeling like, wow, that company really did an amazing job. We thought we were only going to get this, but look at what we got. It was an amazing time and a great experience. And so rather than trying to wow clients up front by promising them things that you then somehow fail to deliver on is not a good thing. So it's much better to under-promise and then over-deliver and surprise later on. The next thing is to take a hard look at every single area of your business that intersects with the client. And this really extends all the way back to the beginning. Before they ever even hire you, the words you use on your website, how you talk in social media, how do you respond to email inquiries, how do you talk to them on the telephone, what do you do when you meet them in person to talk about doing the photography for them, the booking session. Then there's the actual photography session itself. I can't tell you how many times that I was working in places like the Memphis Botanic Gardens or the park where there would be other photographers there working with their clients, and I saw photographers literally getting frustrated with their own clients, because maybe children weren't cooperating or whatever reason, and they were getting upset and visibly showing that to their clients, which is really a terrible shame. In fact, there was a well-known photographer here in Memphis who was the go-to child photographer for many years. And when I met the gentleman one time, all he did was rant about how digital photographers were stealing his business. He was obviously very angry about it. And sometime after that, somebody came to me to photograph her grandchildren, and she said, "Oh, well, we use this other photographer, but the gentleman I was talking about just now, we went to him, but he just yelled at the kids because they weren't doing what he wanted them to do, and he got mad at them. And he was allowing his own frustrations with the business to spill over into the relationships with his clients, and it destroyed his business. He's no longer working." And so you have to look at every single point of contact and see how can you improve that, how can you turn that into something that your clients will literally just be wowed by. Effective personal communication is obviously a key factor. Be proactive on social media. So this comes down to sort of caring for your clients, if you like. If you see somebody having a bad day, well, just wish them, that they get better, or wish them happy birthday, or say, "Oh, I noticed that this happened and hope everything's going well," and so on and so forth. Communicate with them on a personal level. Do the unexpected at every possible point. This kind of goes back to one of the earlier points, but you can do things like send them gifts in the mail, just unexpected things. You don't advertise that you do this, but you just do it, and just send people, just something small that makes them happy or gives them a lift in their day. And this whole thing is the one thing that fuels word-of-mouth marketing, because when people have an experience, good or bad, they'll be sure to talk about it with their friends. And you really don't want them talking about a bad experience. No one's going to talk about a mediocre one. If it was just, well, that was, we went and we had our photos taken and it was nice and all that, well, so what? No one's going to talk about that. But if you, you can be rest assured if you screwed up, they'll be talking about it. And if you did a fantastic job, they'll be talking about it as well. So moving on to question number 3, who are your business allies? So what this really means is, who are the other vendors who serve the same target market that you do? So weddings are a good example with this one. There's cake makers, there's limo drivers, DJs, florists, wedding planners, you name it, all these types of vendors who serve the same people. And, of course, just like photographers, there's going to be different levels of those. So you go find the ones who serve the same ideal clients that you do, and then you form relationships with them, and you start to help each other. You can also approach charities and other local organizations. We had a charity here in Fayette County, where I am, for example, that I worked with for quite a while, and also the Sales and Marketing Society in Memphis. I did some work for them, and it was mutually beneficial. It was a great arrangement. You can also identify the people and businesses who influence your clients as well, and so these can be little societies like art societies and that kind of thing, or it might be let's see, we've got I think I've got some examples. They're on my sheet here actually. So for example, florists, vets, we've got boutique stores, daycares, interior decorators are a good one, art galleries and restaurants, coffee shops and media channels and all that kind of thing. And the key is that good relationships make this work properly. And you know, if we're nice, personable people and we create great relationships with these other vendors, that's great. But we have to adopt a give first, ask later approach. So, you know, you can't just find the email address of some local wedding planner and say, you know, hey Gene, you know, I see you do wedding planning, would you refer me to your clients? That's probably not going to get much of a result. Whereas if you approach her and say, hey Gene, I see you're a wedding planner, it looks like we serve the same people, how would you like to get together over lunch, and I would like to see or learn more about, you know, what you do, so that I can, you know, refer people to you, or I can at least, you know, send folks your way to see if they're a good fit for you, and start the relationship that way. You can cooperate on mutually beneficial projects, or do some sort of co-promotion. The charities one is a good example of this, but also things like vets. So, you know, a veterinary surgeon, you know, may have, or probably does have, a loyal list of clients, people who come to them on a regular basis, and so you could offer to give them something that they could give to their clients as a gift. So it could be a pet portrait session or something like that, but it's a gift that's coming from the vet to their clients rather than you just giving them something, and it actually works wonders. And all of this can act as a great referral network too. And don't forget other photographers in this. You know, there's a very much a mentality of competition in this business. Like, oh, I don't want to, you know, do anything for them because they're my competition. When in reality, you know, regardless of the type of photography you do, whether it's weddings or portraits or whatever, there are going to be times when there's jobs that you can't do simply because you're booked up. You don't have the time. You can't take that job on. But if you refer that person to another trusted photographer, not only does it help the other photographer, but it helps the client too, because you're servicing them. You're giving them the best that they could get other than you. And this is a two-way street, you know, because the other photographers will likewise have times when they can't take on work, and so who would you rather they refer people to? Fourth one, what will your lead generation process look like? You know, how are you going to generate leads for your business? So, you know, we've got some content to attract people. We've got the great experience that we're going to give our clients when we get them, and we've got some business allies that we can work with. But once we pull this together, you know, how are you going to generate leads? And this is kind of really where the rubber meets the road, if you like, and it's where clients are born out of prospects, and it's really critical, you know, for your success in the future. And some of the elements that go into this include things like good SEO and, you know, social media activity to attract the right leads, and so, you know, SEO isn't just about, you know, just putting yourself on Google and, you know, getting yourself to the top and attracting everybody. You want to attract a certain type of people. I actually had a sort of an argument, well, let's say a debate on Facebook the other day in one of the groups with a gentleman who insisted that Google was only good for sending tire kickers and people who were price shopping, when Google doesn't discriminate like that. It's not how it works. The problem is, at the end of the day, if people come to your site and they are put off by whatever it is that's on the website, or it's not engaging in the right way, then yeah, that's what it's going to look like. That's you're going to end up with a situation where you'll get traffic but no activity. But you've got to have good SEO to begin with, and being personable on social media and just being the friendly sort of connecting type is really going to help out here too. We just mentioned this, the compelling website content that engages people. So that's another thing. You've got people on your website. Now you have to engage them. They have to get involved in whatever it is that you have to say. And so you need to create compelling content, stuff that's interesting, valuable, and entertaining, if we want to use that word, so that people can actually start to feel more of a investment in you personally, for one thing, but it wakes them up, if you like, and gets them to start interacting with what you're doing. Now, all of this takes time, and people might not be ready to buy from you right away. They might be looking, thinking about maybe hiring a photographer at some point, but not right today. And so what happens is people can come to your website, look, go, oh, that's nice, but they're not ready, so they go away. And then 2 months later, excuse me, when they are ready, they can't remember you, so they go to Google and somebody else pops up on Google and they end up there instead. So to keep people in the loop, you really need to have something like an email marketing system, whereby you can keep in touch with people until they are ready. And to do that, you would create what we call a free lead magnet to get people to subscribe. So it could be a free guide, for example, or maybe even a video. It doesn't really matter what the thing is, but it has to be interesting and relevant to the people that you want to attract. And it acts as a sort of a bribe, as we call it, an ethical bribe to get people to join your email list. And then you contact them regularly, and each week is ideal. I know a lot of people will probably gasp at that and go, oh gosh, I can't send out an email every week. You actually can. Once a month is the default, but it's not enough, really, in my opinion, and in the opinion of a lot of other expert marketers as well. And one great source that we discovered just recently for this is Pinterest. Pinterest, as you know, is a place where people pin all kinds of stuff that's of interest to them, hence the name. And, if you can pull together some things that you find on there that are going to be of interest to your target audience, all you need to do is just pick one of those and stick it in an email and say to people, hey, look, I found this. This was interesting. I'm sure you'll find it valuable. You're not selling anything to them. You're just keeping in touch. And then that's how you can do that each week. And as far as the lead generation process goes itself, you want to make it easy for them to convert themselves into clients, okay? So you want to make it easy. You've got to have a form or something where they can actually take that step to get it, to put themselves onto your lead list, if you like. And obviously you also need a way to measure progress as well. So otherwise you won't know how you're doing. And finally, the last question here on our list here is, how will you promote your business? And this is probably, I think, one that causes probably the most issues for photographers, but really it's not that hard. And so what you need to do is to identify the channels that are relevant to your clients, because there's a lot of options out there. Everything from offline stuff like radio and TV, which does work in some areas, not all. There's direct mail, there's email marketing, there's video, there's Facebook, Twitter, Pinterest, Google+, LinkedIn. There's all these different social channels, the website and all of that. So you need to identify the ones that are most relevant. I know photographers who are making a killing in their business just simply doing Facebook ads, having a landing page and a basic website. And they're doing 6 figures a year. And they're doing very well. That's what works for them. Is that going to work for everybody? No, of course not. But you have to decide what's going to be best for your business and for your clients. Now, these channels can be either direct or indirect. So a direct example would be the website and blog. Indirect might be video on YouTube or social media, SEO, for example, that kind of thing. And you can also save a lot of time by repurposing your content. And so I do this on Zenilog. You may have noticed recently, that I've repurposed a lot of the content. So, for example, on a Monday, I will very often do a podcast episode where it's just me talking, but I will take that content and create a blog post from it. And then I'll take that and I'll create a shorter article that I put on LinkedIn. And I may even create a video for it as well. And so you can repurpose your content in different ways so that you can cater then to people who like to consume the content in different ways. Some people prefer to read, some like video, some like audio. You have to decide which of those things work best for the majority of your clients. You can get planned help from your business allies, as we talked about before. So, talk with them and say, look, I've got this article coming out. I think it would be of real interest to your folks too. This is when it's coming out. I'll send you the link if you wouldn't mind sharing it with them. Easy. Be personable. We've talked about this a lot, throughout this whole thing, and it feeds into the, know, like, and trust factor. Be personable and make it easy for people to get in touch with you. I can't tell you how many times I've gone to a photographer's website where it's been almost impossible to find their email address to get in touch with them. And these are people that, I've wanted to approach to get on my podcast, for example. And I have to hunt them down and maybe even go as far as tweeting them on Twitter to try and get them to tell me how to get in touch with them. So make it easy. Don't always assume that people know how to do it. And don't forget the call to action to get them to do something. So if you want someone to sign up for an email list, make sure you've got the call to action there. Make sure that it's very clear and that it's obvious. In fact, if it looks too obvious, it's probably on the right track. And finally, don't be afraid to use paid advertising, such as Facebook ads. I mean, you can start with Facebook for as little as $5 a day. You can send people to a landing page that has a specific purpose, of course, not your home page. Have a clear call to action on that page, and then make sure that you target the ads carefully to avoid wasted clicks and so on. Measure the results. Make sure that you're keeping a track of how many impressions you have, how many clicks you get, what the conversion rate is, and then you can sort of tweak it and go from there. But Facebook ads has worked very well for me, and it's working well for a lot of other people. But you have to do it right, and I'll be doing some workshops on Facebook advertising in the future as well. So that was a lot of stuff, and I see we've gone a little bit over time, and thank you so much for sticking around. But just to summarize, we looked at why most photography marketing doesn't work. We've looked at what your clients need to know before they'll hire you, how a foundation can stabilize your marketing, and those 5 questions that you can ask to create that foundation. Which I'll reiterate those. They were how you can best help your prospects resonate with what you do, how you can create an amazing customer experience, who will be your business allies, and how you can turn visitors into leads, and where and how you'll promote what it is that you do. And so with that, we'll go into Q&A. And so I'm going to take a sip of tea, and just while I'm doing that, if you want to go ahead and put your questions in the questions box, I will go ahead and answer as many of those as I can. And it doesn't, if there's anything in here that wasn't all that clear, we'll just just go ahead and ask, and I'll be right back. Okay, well, you all have been awfully quiet back there. Hope you're all still awake. Okay, so Alice made an observation early on in the presentation. She said, do you ever notice how many web services for photographers have many pretty templates, but they don't make any provisions for text or calls to action or landing pages? Yes, I have noticed that, and it's a darn shame, because sadly it's one of the things that I think is kind of contributing to the problem. You know, photographers, or rather, sorry, the website companies that design these templates, you know, are falling back on that same assumption that, you know, photographers just want to showcase their work, and that all they want to do is show off their photographs, which is not, you know, it's not the right way to go about it if we're going to be marketing and selling what we do. The fine art industry, you know, is very problematic in this area. We've talked a lot about this on the Prime Focus calls of late, you know, because the idea being that, you know, if somebody comes to a fine art sales website for the first time and they click on a gallery and they look at some photographs and they go through and backwards and forwards, then you know, they're not likely to buy on that first visit. But are they going to come back? Perhaps, maybe not. I don't know. When I've talked to gallery owners here in Memphis, when I was in the art space, and I asked them, what is it that you feel makes people buy art off the wall in the gallery? And the question, sorry, the answer, more often than not, was they need to know something about the artist. They, you know, if we can tell them the story of the artist first and get them to relate to the artist as a person, it makes selling the artwork so much easier. And you know, this is what we need to do with fine art websites, is to focus on two different things. You know, one, the photographer as an artist, and then secondly, the actual sales part, and they should be kept separate, in my opinion. And so, you know, a blog and that kind of thing is great for the artist to just talk about the philosophy of what they're doing, the things that inspire them, maybe feature an image here and there and talk about that one specific photograph, but not from a sales perspective. And unfortunately, it's very hard to do that with a lot of the templates that are out there. So let's have a look here. We've got that one. Okay, so Karen has a question about an about page, and what an about page would sound like if it's about your clients and not about you. Okay, great question, Karen. I mean, we could do a whole, you know, a whole session on just this alone, but I'll try and sort of keep it, you know, maybe the 30-second version. So let's say that you're a portrait photographer and you want to tell people that you specialize in doing portraits at their home where, you know, people, you know, are in their own environment and that kind of thing, and that's what you do. So one way to do it would be the old way, if you like, is, hey, you know, I'm Karen, I'm a portrait photographer, and I'll come to your house and I'll photograph your family and your kids in your backyard, and everyone, you know, is happy. That's one way to do it. Another way is, you know, hey, I'm Karen, I'm a portrait photographer, and just like you, I understand that people can feel a little bit uncomfortable when they're not in their familiar surroundings, especially if we're going to be shoving a camera in their face. And you know, this can be a problem for children, for example. You know, they don't always want to cooperate because they're in a strange environment. There's a stranger pointing a camera at them. They can become very self-conscious. And, you know, you understand just as well as me that we can alleviate that problem by photographing these children in their, you know, own environment, on their home turf, if you like, where they feel more comfortable. And so what you're doing is you're saying, you know, this is what you believe, this is what I believe, and this is where the two intersect. It's about you as much as it is about me. As a 30-second version, there's a whole article on the Zenilog site about pages, which you can probably take a look at on there. So thank you for that question, Karen. It's a great one. Stefano, let's see. Okay, so thank you, Stefano. I'm glad that you found this useful and interesting. I appreciate that a lot. And he says, I think some people might have the problem of being overwhelmed with the amount of things to do, lacking of organization and that kind of thing. What advice do I have? Yeah, oh my gosh, overwhelmed. This is one of the words that people, photographers use a lot, is they feel overwhelmed because there is so much to do. I think that the first thing to do is to stop, take a deep breath, and relax, and just understand that, okay, there might be a lot to do, but if we can somehow get it down on paper and out of our heads, that helps tremendously. I think back to a point in time back in early 2014 when I was going through a period where I was just overwhelmed with all the things that I felt that I had to do for Zenilog, and I was thinking about starting the podcast and doing more webinars, and literally my head felt like it was about to explode with all of these ideas and things I felt I had to do. And my coach, because I have coaches too, said to me, look, put it down on paper, empty your head. And I said, well, how's that going to help? And he said, trust me. So I did. I wrote it all down. You can use a pen and paper or type it out, whatever you want. And, oh boy, what a difference. Because all of a sudden you can see it right there in front of you. These are the things that I want to work on, and then you can start to tackle them one bit at a time. It's like the old thing about eating an elephant, right? How do you eat an elephant? Well, you one bite at a time. And so you just take it one step at a time. If you can organize it into some kind of order, prioritize things, that can help. But the big thing really is to not let it get on top of you to the point where you start to feel that panic of, oh gosh, I don't know what I'm going to do first. I hear that people, there's these TV shows where they show hoarders and stuff like that. People whose houses just get so uncontrollably full of junk, and a lot of times they said, well, how did this all start? Well, it kind of crept up on me, and then I got overwhelmed, and I just didn't know where to start to clean it up. Some of it's compulsive, but a lot of times it's just simply that it got beyond a certain point where they just couldn't deal with it anymore, and we don't want that. So get it on paper, get it out of your head somehow, talk it through with somebody. This is where having a coach can help. Find someone, but it doesn't have to be me, it can be anybody that can talk you through this and help you to externalize a lot of the issues that you might have. So I don't know if that helps. It certainly helped me, Stefano, so good question, thank you. Let's see, we've got, thank you, Len, appreciate that, and thanks, Stefano. Okay, so should sales copy be limited to certain pages? That was a question from Karen. You know what? In some regards, everything that you write on your website is a form of sales copy. It's only how you sort of choose to view it. If you see it like if it's salesy, the very best sales copy really isn't actually asking for a sale. It's communicating with people and helping people. So really, no, I don't think sales copy should be limited because you really have to have a call to action across almost every page of your website. So, but it's the way that you say it as opposed to what you say that makes the big difference there. Let's see, we've got, what's the best way to start email marketing? Oh my gosh, are you ready to sit here for another 2 hours? Let me give you some resources for that. So on the podcast, on the Photography Marketing Masters podcast, I think it's episode 3, is an interview that I did with a gentleman in the UK called Ian Brody, who wrote a book called Email Persuasion, and I interviewed him about that. I'm also a member of his Facebook group, which you get, if you buy the book. There's a link to where you can join that group from that. Highly recommend it. Email Persuasion. You can get it from Amazon. I think it's like $4, I think, for the Kindle versions, and so it's really inexpensive, but oh boy, is it a good book. And then I put an article out on Zenilog just last week about email marketing, so that should give you some hints and tips in there on where to get started with that. And then beyond that, I will probably be having another workshop on email marketing at some point as well. So I hope that helps. Stefano says, I don't know where to start with Facebook ads. Okay, so really with Facebook ads, the best way to start with that is to decide on an action that you want people to take, whether it's to sign up for an email list or take up an offer or register their interest in something. You create a landing page for that. Specifically, you don't link to that page from anywhere else in the website. You don't do any SEO on it or anything like that. It just sits there kind of on its own on the website, but it has a headline and some benefits and describes what it is that the offer is or whatever the people are going to get, a strong call to action, and then you create a Facebook ad that sends people to that page. And you obviously you would have to target it according to who it is you want to reach. Which depends on your geography or demographics and that kind of thing. And you can start for as little as $5 a day and see how it goes. There's a lot of information out on the web about Facebook ads, and I hate to sound like a broken record, but I probably will have a workshop on that as well at some point soon. And last one here, I think, from Alice. What essential pieces need to be in place before you start marketing, for example, infrastructure of the business? Yeah, so obviously be legal wherever you're at. Have a proper business, with all of the appropriate licenses and registered for sales tax and all that kind of thing if need be. That's that. Obviously, that part. I think other than that, I mean, you should have your own internal methods of keeping track of your business in place, your accounting, internal bookkeeping and all that kind of thing, your bank account and so on and so forth, means for people to pay you and such like. And then make sure that flow from start to finish, from the time when they hire you to the booking, to the actual photography session, to the ordering of the finished products, is all streamlined and all in place, and you know exactly how it's going to work. Other than that, I can't really think of anything else. I'm sure that I may have missed something there. I'm no expert on the infrastructure side of things, just more the marketing. So with that, folks, I would like to thank you so much for being here today. Thank you for investing in this workshop. I sincerely hope that it has provided you with way more value than what you invested in it to begin with. So with that, thank you guys. We've been here for about 30 minutes longer than anticipated, but I congratulate you on sticking around. Okay, well, thanks again, and thank you, Stefano. I'm glad you enjoyed it. Thank you. And so with that, I'll bid you all farewell for today, and I'll let you know as soon as the recording is available.